Hello, Namaskar and Adab to all my friends from your friend Astrology and Guide Irfan, once more with you from your very own channel Astro Assurance. Today we'll talk about a slightly technical topic in astrology, and this is normally not taught initial when somebody takes up astrology, neither should one get into it in the initial stages. But this is a very important concept of astrology, and when we are getting to deeper topics of yogas, we are looking at conjunctions, we're talking about aspects of the major planets, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Rahu and so on. And if we don't look at this concept, which is the Arghala concept, then one will do an incomplete job of overall understanding placements and manifesting whether there are more challenges which are coming out of a horoscope, or there are more promises, good and bad, or there are more upheavals out of a placement of a horoscope. So what does the overall horoscope look like? When you're looking at the overall horoscope and trying to determine how it looks and what areas of potential are promised more than the others, then the concept of Arghala is very important. Now, what is Arghala? The concept of Arghala is of intervention or influencing. So if there is any influence or intervention of a planetary body or entity on a certain area of your life, then that is supposed to be causing Arghala or intervention or influencing that particular attribute, that house or that attribute of your life. So these can be seen through various other adjectives. Somebody can call it as those who acting like a catalyst. Catalyst is something which will increase the potential or give a higher output from a certain area. For example, if there is a fire and if you put petrol or diesel in that fire, then there will be a larger fire, huge fire, and the fire will spread more also if you add fuel to fire, as it is said. So Arghala is also about what are the influencing factors, are they positive or negative, and what are the promises they give to a certain area of your life. Now, without making it very technical, I want to keep it very, very simple so that you understand the concept of Arghala in a very simple manner, and you can look at your own horoscope and understand the concept in a layman's language. Firstly, I will use the Lagna itself to explain you the Arghala, and it will be easy for you to understand. What do we see the source of income or sustenance for an individual? We look at the second house. The second house is it is also the house of food, what we eat, and because we eat food, so it sustains you, and your earnings and your income sustains you, keeps you fed, and so the second house is the house of sustenance, whether it is food or money or earnings. Secondly, what is the house of your domestic happiness, your mental peace? That house is the fourth house, the house which emotionally nurtures you, nourishes you, supports you and takes care of you at an emotional level. That is the fourth house. And what is the house which fulfills your desires, your aspirations? That is your 11th house. The 11th house is the house of fulfilling of your desires. So these three houses, the second house, the fourth house and 11th house, are very important houses from a positive influence point of view. And so any planet which goes into the second house, if they are benefics, we say benefics in the second house help us get more sustenance, help us get more earnings. So more benefics in the second house are good. Same thing with the fourth house. If there are more benefics in the fourth house, we say then they add to our happiness, add to our mental peace, and so benefics in the fourth house are also good and welcome. Thirdly, if there are benefics in the 11th house, then too they are good, because then they are helping us achieve our aspirations. However, we also say that malefics placed in the second house, fourth house and 11th house will cause challenges in sustenance, in emotional nourishment and aspiration fulfillment. That in a nutshell you can say is the concept of Arghala. which means from the first house, from the Lagna, the 2nd, 4th and 11th, if there are benefics placed in it, they will give you good results. If there are malefics placed in it, they will give you challenging results. So when you look at the 2nd house, the 4th house, the 11th house, from any house, planets in them, if they are benefics, they will give you good results. If there are malefics, they will give you challenging results. Say for example, what are the 2nd house, 4th house and 11th house from the 7th house? The 2nd house to the 7th house is the 8th house. What is the 8th house of? The 8th house is also of all those things which are hidden. Your desires, the sexual act is also hidden. You don't do it openly. Maybe the world is changing. We are moving to a different world now. However, traditionally, socially, still 8th house is also the house of your sexual indulgence, which you, so the 7th house, the house of marital relationships, the committed relationship, your sexual energies, the intimacy will give sustenance to the 7th house and keep the couple close to each other and happy conjugally. And many times, if the intimacy is present in between the couple, to some extent, not to a large extent, but to some extent, it will reduce the issues between them also. That's why probably the make-up sex, they say, is very, very enjoyable. So the 2nd house to a house is a Arghala house to that, which means an influencer to that house. Then what is the 4th house from the 7th house? The 4th house from the 7th house is the 10th house. What is the 10th house of? The house of karma and also the house of working. Now, if you are not working, if you are not doing your karma, you are not doing your duties, you are not going to work, then how will you sustain the grihastha ashrama? Because the earning that you are getting home to nourish the 7th house, like how the 4th house to the 1st house will nourish the 4th house by giving you cars, vehicles, gemstones, all domestic appliances. Similarly, the 10th house is the 4th house to the 7th house. So to nourish the grihastha ashram, the 4th house to the grihastha ashram, which is the 10th house, becomes critical, becomes important. So the mental happiness and the mental peace and the domestic happiness of the grihastha ashram will be there only when the person is ready to put in work, hard work, ready to labor to keep it nourished, and does his karma, does his duty, and also works and brings home the and nourishes the home. What is the 11th house to the 7th house? The 11th house to the 7th house is the 5th house. The 5th house is what are your desires from marriage? You desire love and romance. You want love from your spouse. You want affection from your spouse. You want not just you and your spouse to indulge in intimacy, in the conjugal relation, but you also want the emotional happiness. So the 5th house being the house of romance, that is one of the desires for you, that you have love and romance from your partner. Second, this 5th house is also the house of children, and it is 11th house to the 7th house. So one of the desires of the grihastha ashrama of a couple is also to have children, and that's why the 11th house is also the house of gains. What do you gain out of a grihastha ashrama, out of a committed relationship? Once the sustenance of the 8th house is there, then you get the gains that 11th house brings in the matter of children. But the 5th house is also the house of taking risks. So getting into a committed relationship with somebody is not lesser than a risk. You don't know the complete story. You can never be 100% sure how the relationship will be going. So it's some sort of a gamble that you take, some sort of a risk you take. So the 5th house is also the house of speculation and gambling. A marriage is also a gamble that you take, a risk that you take, a speculative act that you do. So, but the aspirations of the 7th house can be fulfilled through the 11th house to it, which is the 5th house. So the 2nd house, the 4th house and 11th house to any house are important houses and they are the influencing houses. They are the houses which intervene for that particular house. And if there are more benefics in the second house, the fourth house and the 11th house from any house, it will give you more good results. Now, this is as far as the benefics are concerned. What will happen if there are malefics? Just like if there are more malefics in the second house to the Lagna, then your income and your savings will be into a challenge. Same thing about the 7th house. If there are more malefics in the 8th house, and 8th house being the second house to the 7th house, then the sustenance will be more difficult. There may be issues which may be health issues also of the 8th house, which means that somebody can be performing less in the act of intimacy. So the food for the Grihastha Ashrama, the intimacy may either be afflicted or somebody may even cheat in the relationship. If there are more malefics in the 8th house, especially if Saturn and Rahu, those kind of combinations they establish, connecting in some way to the 7th lord or the 4th lord, then there could be higher chance of somebody also indulging in acts out of marriage and spoiling the sustenance of the particular house. Why? The 8th house is also the house of others' wealth. So others' wealth could also be you indulge with people outside of marriage who should not be accessible to you because you're already committed, or they may already be in a relation with somebody else. And so when you are indulging in an sexual act with somebody else outside of your committed relationship, then you are going beyond the boundaries of the Grihastha Ashram of the 7th house. And so whenever there are more malefics placed in the 8th house, one needs to be careful of how one will lead their married life. Then if there are more malefics in the 10th house, then again the 10th house being the 4th house from the 7th house and the Argala house for the 7th house, if there are more malefics placed in it, then the work will suffer, and because of the work suffering, the Grihastha Ashrama, if you have too much trouble at work, you're too tense at work, you're too frustrated at work, then when you come back home, you cannot be all nice and happy and chirpy. And you may not show that much to your children, but you may take it out on the spouse, or you may share it with your spouse. And spouse will also share your anxieties, will share your frustrations, and that is important for a couple to do. They should share with each other the challenges that they face. So if the husband or wife comes back from work and they share what challenges they are going through problems, upheavals, allegations at work, facing chance of demotion or being given the pink slip, asked to go, then obviously the Grihastha Ashram, the happiness of the Grihastha Ashram, the mental peace of the couple will also be affected. And if there are malefics placed in the 5th house, which is again an Argala house for the 7th house being 11th house to it, what does it mean? If there are malefics placed in the 5th house, which means the love and romance can get affected, because one of the desires and aspirations in a marriage, because the 11th house is the house of aspirations and desires, you desire love and romance, that can be affected because there are malefics placed in the 5th house, which is the 11th house from the 7th house. The other things could be that the other desire is for children. There may be challenges in getting children. Giving birth to children may be an issue. And if there are more malefics placed in it, there may also be a challenge where children may not be very supportive of a couple. Later on, the children may not help the family, or the children may also develop some challenges, issues, maybe health challenges or bad habits. Somewhere there could be some challenges. And the education of the children may also be affected. Now, because the 5th house is also the house of children and education. So, that is also an aspiration of the parents, that the children should study and do well in life. So, malefics placed in the 2nd house, 4th house and 11th house from a house will give you challenges, will give you a negative Argala, which means a negative influence, a negative intervention rather than a positive. Benefics placed in the 2nd, 4th and 11th are a positive Argala. Malefics placed in the 2nd, 4th and 11th house from any house will give you a negative Argala or a challenging Argala or challenging intervention and influencing for that house and the manifestation and the attributes and the results of that house. Now, where did this all come from? There is the shloka which Parashar says in Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. In fact, he has dedicated an entire chapter called the Argala Adhyay, which gives more clarity on what are the Argalas and some of the shlokas about the Argalas. Let's look into one of them. Parashara says in the Argala Adhyay, Maitreya, I explain below Argala to know definite effects of houses and planets. Planets in the 4th, 2nd and 11th from a house or a planet cause Argala, while obstructors of the Argala will be those that are in the 10th, 12th and 3rd. If the Argala causing planet is stronger than the obstructing one, the former will prevail. Now the other part, if the 2nd, 4th and the 11th are the ones which are giving you Argala or influencing the results of that house, whether they are malefics or benefics, if there are planets placed in the 2nd, 4th or 11th house, they will either give you positive influence and positive intervention or positive results, or negative or challenging intervention. However, what can be an obstructor to this influence, which means if there are benefic planets placed in the 2nd house from the Lagna, then it is a positive Argala. Why is it a positive Argala? Because there are benefics. If there are malefics, then it's a negative Argala, because they will give you negative influence. But whether they are positives or negative, they will be influencing. Now, to take away this influence and to negate this influence, whether positive or negative, if there are any planets placed in the 3rd house from that house, which is the Lagna, then they will spoil the effects of that house, or they will take away the influencing capacity of the 2nd, 4th and 11th house. So the influencing capacity of planets in the 2nd house, the 4th house and 11th house can be taken away and negated by planets being placed in the 3rd house, 10th house and 12th house. That is as simple as that. It is that you have the key to a car, okay, but your dad has taken out the battery. Then what will you do? You have the key, you have the car, but the battery of the car is not there. Then you can't drive. It is as good as that. Planets are placed in the 2nd house to the Lagna. They are giving you positive influence. If planets are negative malefic planets are placed in the 2nd from the Lagna, they are still give you some influence. But if the influence has to be negated, then any planet which are placed in the 3rd house or the 10th house or the 12th house from the Lagna or from that house will take away the influencing capacity, good or bad, from planets placed in the 2nd house or 4th house or the 11th house. So how do you see whether overall Argala is there or not there? Any positive or negative influence, is it there or not there? If there are more planets in the 2nd house, 4th house and 11th house than the number of planets placed in the 3rd house, 10th house and 12th house, then you say that the Argala is overcome the Virod Argala. Virod Argala is nothing but the obstruction to the Argala, obstruction to the influence, good or bad influence, whatever it is. So more planets placed in the 2nd house, 4th house and 11th house, and less planets in the 3rd house, the 10th house and 12th house means Argala is there, good or bad. But if there are more planets in the 3rd house, 10th house and 12th house combined than the number of planets placed in the 2nd house, 4th and 11th house combined, then the Argala or any influence, good or bad, or malefics or benefics, is reduced on the Lagna. And so that means the results from the Lagna will be less that you will get because of being obstructed. So any influence that you get for a particular house gives you an opportunity, good or bad. It will give you an opportunity to do good or to overcome challenges and to do good. But if there are too strong Argalas from a house, then you have to work that much more harder to manifest results of that house. Too many planets, especially negative planets, malefic planets in the 3rd house, 10th and 12th house from the Lagna, which means for your reputation, for your pride, for your self-respect, to rise high in society, and to for good health, you will have to work that much more harder. If there are more planets in the 2nd, 4th and 11th house from the Lagna, then there is more influence on the Lagna, and if there are more benefics, you get better results. If there are more malefics, then you may get challenges. But you also have opportunities. Even if there is a malefic or there is a negative Argala in the 2nd, 4th and 11th, you still have a chance to overcome it and get it. But if the Argala is obstructed by the Virodha Argala, Virod is against the Argala. So if there are planets in the 3rd, 10th and 12th, then they are obstructing any influence of that particular house. Here we are talking about the Lagna. Then you have to work much more hard to get results from the Lagna, even harder than when malefics are placed in the 2nd, 4th or 11th, because 2nd, 4th and 11th malefics will give you challenges, but it will also give you an opportunity. Why is the 3rd house, the 10th house and 12th house obstructors to the Argalas? The reason being is the 3rd house is the house of effort, which means you will have to work harder to attain the results of a certain house. The 3rd house from any house will be the effort that you will have to do about the house. The 10th house is the house of karma, and again 10th house is which planet rules the 10th house? The natural ruler of the 10th house is Saturn, and 10th house is the house of karma, where you have to work hard, committed, put in long hours to work harder to manifest results. So it will not make it easy for you to get results if there are planets in the 10th. What is the 12th house? The 12th house is the house of waste and excess, which means things or efforts going to waste, or spending more hours and getting less output, spending more money and getting less out of it. That is the 12th house, and that's why the 3rd, 10th and 12th to any house are seen as the obstructors to the Argala or the Virodha Argalas. So friends, once you understand your overall horoscope in terms of Lagna Lord, where it is placed, what yogas you have, how strong are the Kendras and the trine houses, and then look at what are the planets, if there are any, what are the houses which are most influenced, which houses are most active, which are the strongest planets. Once you look into it, do look into the Argala, do look into the planets in the 2nd, 4th and 11th from the Lagna, and then see the planets in the 3rd, 10th and 12th from the Lagna, and see if there are more planets in the 2nd, 4th and 11th, and if there are benefics, or there are more planets in the 3rd, 10th and 12th, and whether they are taking away the benefic or malefic influence of the Argala itself. After you do that, once you understand it completely from the Lagna, then you can see it from different houses. Then you can see it from the Kendra. Then look at the Argalas for the 4th house. The Argalas for the 4th house are the 5th house, the 7th house and the 2nd house. The 5th house, because the 5th house is the 2nd house to the 4th house. The 7th house, because the 7th house is 4th from the 4th house, and the 2nd house, because the 2nd house is the 11th house from the 4th house. And once you look at the Kendras, then look at the trine houses, then you can look at the other houses. So once you understand the Lagna and the Kendra houses and the Argalas to them and the Virodha Argalas to them, and understand what manifestation you have, then you can work in that direction. Now, how do you use Argalas? Whenever you see a certain house getting more positive Argalas, then that means that is an opportunity, a karmic opportunity for you to work in the direction of that house and attributes of that house. For example, if there are more positive Argalas to the 5th house, then it is you are given an opportunity to work towards the manifestation of the 5th house. What are the Argala houses to the 5th house? The 6th house is the 2nd house to the 5th house. Then the 8th house is the 4th house from the 5th house, and then the 3rd house is the 11th house from the 5th house. So the 6th house, the 8th house and the 3rd house are the Argala houses to the 5th house. So if they are strong, if the 5th house is showing more positive Argalas, then an opportunity is given to you to manifest results of the 5th house, to study, for public to use your artistic skills, to take risks, to speculate, to not hesitate to change your jobs when a good opportunity is coming, or to look for a good opportunity every now and then when you're stagnating into your work or you're not getting happiness. So don't fear. Try and take a step outside. Don't be in a cocoon. Don't be in this secure zone that even if I get less, even if I don't get promoted, this job is easy for me, I'm getting whatever I need. Take a risk. Take a calculated risk, but take a risk if your fifth house is very strong in terms of positive Argalas, because the change of job is an opportunity given to you. For example, take a risk in public performances. If there is an inner artist inside you, go out and try and sustain that artist. Take some risk, small, calculated, well informed, well educated risk in speculation, in stocks, in shares, in investing into something else, but spread your investments. Don't worry about your children too much. Overall they will do good, but important is that the values, the second house to a house is also the values and principles. Give them a principle life, give them a life of values, and they will do well in life. So look at which house has the most positive Argalas and work in that direction. That is the boon given to you by a karma. That is the one that is being given to you as a reward. So whatever house has more Argala, positive Argala, that is a case in point for you. Take it forward and run with it. So friends, understand your horoscopes, use your Argalas, and may you do well. If you're looking for a personal consultation from me, please reach out to me at the links given below. Until some other time with some other video, this is your friend, astrologer and guide Irfan, signing off. Ciao.